Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. My name's James, and until recently, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Lisa, my wife of 10 years, and I had built a life together that felt solid. Or at least, I thought it was. It all started with little things. You know how you can just sense when something's off? Lisa started acting distant, always on her phone, smiling at texts, and giving me these vague excuses about working late or needing me time. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Work had been crazy for both of us, and we had 2 kids to raise. But the late nights started adding up, and the excuses got harder to believe. One evening, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she stepped outside to take a call. Normally, I wouldn't snoop, but something about how she clutched the phone made me curious. A notification popped up. A message from Brian Work. I knew Brian. He was a coworker of hers. Seemed harmless, right? But the text? It wasn't work-related. It was a winky face. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I confronted her later that night, casually asking about Brian. Her reaction was defensive, too defensive. She claimed he was just a friend and that I was being paranoid. I wanted to believe her, but the seed of doubt was already planted. The next few weeks were torture. Every time her phone buzzed, my heart sank. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was being crazy, but the gut feeling wouldn't go away. So one night, after she fell asleep, I made a decision I never thought I'd have to make. I checked her phone. And that's when I found it. Explicit messages. Photos. Plans to meet up. My wife, the woman I trusted with everything, was having an affair with Brian. At that moment, I felt like my entire world shattered. But instead of confronting her right then and there, I decided I needed to think. Lisa had lied to my face, and I wasn't about to give her the chance to wiggle out of this. If she thought she could fool me, she had another thing coming. I wasn't going to let her destroy me quietly. I needed a plan. After finding those messages, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring into the darkness, trying to process it all. My wife was cheating on me, with Brian of all people. He wasn't even some big-shot executive or anything, just a guy from her office. I'd met him once or twice at work events. He seemed harmless. Friendly, even. I guess that was part of the act. The next day, I started watching more closely. Lisa's patterns, her behavior, her excuses. It was like a puzzle, and the more I observed, the more pieces started fitting together. She would leave for work earlier than usual or come home late, always blaming some client emergency or last-minute meeting. One night, she said she was heading out for a girls' night. She got all dressed up, which seemed over the top for drinks with friends. I couldn't stop picturing her messages with Brian, so I decided to check if she was really where she said she'd be. I drove by the restaurant she mentioned. No sign of her car. My stomach tightened as I considered the worst-case scenario. I called her to check in, and she answered, laughing like everything was fine. "Oh, we just switched places," she said casually. "You know how it is when you can't get a table." She rattled off some new bar she claimed they'd moved to. It didn't sit right with me. I was still outside the first location, and my gut told me she'd never been there. I decided to drive by the bar she mentioned next. Again, no sign of her. Instead, I saw Brian's car parked outside a hotel nearby. My heart pounded as I connected the dots. I wanted to barge in and catch them red-handed, but something held me back. I didn't just want to confront her. I wanted to make sure there was no way she could deny it. That night, I went home and did more digging. It turns out Brian was married too. His wife Karen was someone I'd only seen in a few pictures, but it hit me, she deserved to know the truth too. If Lisa and Brian thought they could play us both for fools, they were wrong. I started keeping screenshots of everything. The texts, the pictures, even the fake excuses Lisa would throw at me. I wasn't just going to expose her, I was going to do it in a way they'd never forget. With every passing day, I felt the weight of the betrayal a little less, and something else started to grow in its place: determination. If Lisa and Brian thought they could lie and sneak around without consequences, they were about to get a wake-up call. I needed to be smart about this. Emotional outbursts wouldn't get me anywhere. I wasn't going to yell, scream, or flip the dinner table. No, I wanted something bigger, something undeniable. Lisa wasn't just going to face me, she was going to face everyone. That's when the idea hit me. Our anniversary was coming up in a few weeks, and I always threw a backyard party. Friends, neighbors, her coworkers, basically everyone we knew would come. It was the perfect setup. This year, though, it wouldn't be a celebration of love. It would be a reckoning. The first step was laying the groundwork. I sent out invitations, making it clear that this was going to be our biggest bash yet. I made sure to invite Brian and his wife Karen. I'd only met Karen briefly before, but I could already tell she was sweet and probably clueless about what was going on. That made it even harder to stomach what Brian and Lisa were doing behind her back. While organizing the party, I continued gathering evidence. Every time Lisa left the house, I tracked where she went. I even got a GPS tracker and discreetly attached it to her car. Sure enough, she visited that same hotel more than once. Each time, Brian's car was parked there too. I started taking pictures, time-stamping everything. I also backed up her phone's messages and emails, everything I could use to paint a clear picture of what they'd been up to. This wasn't about pettiness, it was about making sure there was no room for excuses or lies when the moment came. The final piece of the puzzle was Karen. I debated whether to tell her beforehand or let her find out during the party. In the end, I decided to wait. She deserved to see the full truth laid out, just like everyone else. The night before the party, I barely slept. My mind raced with a mix of anger and anticipation. Lisa was her usual self, acting like nothing was wrong, completely unaware of what was coming. She even thanked me for organizing the party, saying how much she appreciated me. That stung more than I expected. For a moment, I almost doubted myself. But then I remembered those texts, those lies, and all the nights she spent with Brian while I sat at home, taking care of our kids. There was no turning back now. The day of the party arrived, and I could feel the tension simmering beneath the surface. Lisa, completely oblivious, was in full hostess mode, decorating the backyard, arranging the buffet, and chatting about how excited she was to see everyone. It was almost impressive how easily she could act normal after everything she'd done. Meanwhile, I was laser-focused on executing the plan. I made sure the guest list was complete, her coworkers, our neighbors, and most importantly, Brian and Karen. Everyone needed to be there. This wasn't going to be a private showdown, it was going to be a public reckoning. Guests started arriving in the early evening, filling the backyard with laughter and chatter. I played the role of the perfect host, greeting everyone, cracking jokes, and keeping a drink in hand. I didn't want anyone suspecting that something was brewing. Lisa, dressed in her favorite summer dress, was glowing as she mingled with the crowd. Watching her like this, smiling carefree, almost made me forget what I was about to do. Almost. Then Brian and Karen arrived. I felt my stomach tighten as I saw them walking up the driveway. Brian had that smug look on his face, the same one I'd seen in those messages. Karen, on the other hand, looked radiant and happy. She greeted me warmly, completely unaware that her life was about to change. I kept my interactions with them brief, making sure not to tip my hand. Karen seemed genuinely excited to be there, chatting with Lisa like they were old friends. Brian, though, avoided eye contact with me. I don't know if it was guilt or just arrogance, but something told me he suspected I wasn't as clueless as I seemed. As the evening went on, I made sure to steer the party toward the perfect moment. I waited until the drinks were flowing and everyone was relaxed. People were scattered around the yard, some by the grill, others lounging near the fire pit. It was the kind of scene you'd see in a family album: smiles, laughter, kids playing in the background. Lisa, ever the social butterfly, was at the center of it all, basking in the attention. She didn't notice when I slipped inside the house to grab the envelope containing all the evidence I'd gathered. My hands trembled slightly as I held it, but I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I was doing this. This wasn't just for me, it was for Karen, for my kids, and for everyone who believed in honesty and loyalty. I stepped back outside, scanning the crowd for Brian and Lisa. They were standing together near the drink table, laughing at some joke. Perfect. Hey everyone. I called out, clinking my glass to get their attention. The conversations quieted, and all eyes turned toward me. Lisa smiled, clearly expecting me to make some cheesy toast about our marriage. If only she knew. I just wanted to thank you all for coming tonight, I began, keeping my tone light. It means a lot to Lisa and me to have such wonderful friends and neighbors. There were murmurs of agreement, and Lisa beamed, nodding along. I let the silence hang for a moment before continuing. But before we go any further, there's something important I need to share. Something that's been weighing on me for a while. The mood shifted instantly. Lisa's smile faltered, and Brian's expression darkened. I locked eyes with him for a brief second before pulling out the envelope. The backyard fell silent as I stood there holding the envelope. The weight of what was about to happen was suffocating, but I pushed through. I could feel Lisa's eyes on me, confused, maybe even a little nervous. Brian, on the other hand, looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Karen stood next to him, oblivious to the tension building. I took a deep breath. I've always believed in transparency, especially with the people we care about most. And tonight, I think it's time for some honesty. Lisa's confusion turned into visible unease. "James, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I ignored her and opened the envelope, pulling out the printed screenshots, photos, and timelines I'd collected over the past few weeks. I held them up for everyone to see. "Lisa," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "why don't you explain what these are?" She froze. For a moment, it seemed like the world stopped turning. Then, almost instinctively, she reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, trying to play dumb. Her voice cracked just enough to betray her. "Don't play games with me," I said firmly. "These are messages between you and Brian. The ones where you planned your little meetups, sent each other pictures, and lied to me over and over again." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Karen's face turned pale, her eyes darting toward Brian. "Wait, what is he talking about?" she asked, her voice shaky. Brian opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked trapped, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by panic. Lisa's composure snapped. "James, stop. This is private. You're embarrassing yourself, and me," she hissed, her voice rising. "Private." I laughed bitterly. "You made it public the moment you decided to betray me. So, let's not pretend you're the victim here." Karen stepped forward, grabbing one of the papers from my hand before I could stop her. As she read the messages, her hands began to shake. "Brian," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "is this true?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at the ground, his silence confirming everything. Karen's face crumpled, and tears welled up in her eyes. "How could you?" she whispered. Lisa tried to intervene, reaching out to Karen. "Karen, please, it's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like." I interrupted, my voice rising. "You mean it's not you in these messages? It's not your car parked outside that hotel? Go ahead, Lisa, tell us what it really is." By now, everyone was staring. Some looked shocked, others uncomfortable, and a few even seemed morbidly curious. The neighbors exchanged whispers, while Lisa's coworkers watched in stunned silence. Karen, clutching the papers, turned to Lisa. "You were supposed to be my friend," she said, her voice trembling. "I trusted you. I trusted both of you." She threw the papers to the ground and stormed out, leaving Brian standing there, his mouth still hanging open. Lisa rounded on me, her face red with fury. "How could you do this to me in front of everyone? You've ruined everything," she screamed. "Me?" I shot back. "I ruined everything? You're the one sneaking around with him behind my back. I'm just the guy who finally had the guts to say something." The crowd began to disperse awkwardly, some offering me sympathetic glances while others avoided eye contact. Brian, now alone, muttered something about leaving and hurried after Karen, but I doubted she'd forgive him anytime soon. Lisa stayed behind, glaring at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this, James," she spat before storming inside the house. But I didn't regret it, not for 1 second. Once the backyard emptied, I stood there in the quiet, staring at the mess left behind. The spilled drinks, the scattered papers, the stunned silence that hung in the air even after everyone was gone. It felt surreal, like I had just stepped out of a movie where the protagonist finally pulls off a dramatic twist. But the reality was much heavier. Lisa had stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door so hard it shook the house. I didn't follow her. I needed a moment to breathe, to process what had just happened. I sat down by the fire pit, staring at the glowing embers and sipping a beer, trying to figure out where to go from here. About 20 minutes later, Karen called. Her voice was shaky, but she thanked me for exposing the truth. "I don't know what I'll do," she admitted. "But at least now I know. I've been living in a lie." I'm sorry you had to find out like that, I told her. You didn't deserve any of this. She paused, then said something that stuck with me. Neither did you. Inside the house, the kids were thankfully unaware of the chaos. I had sent them to a neighbor's house for a sleepover earlier in the day, knowing they didn't need to witness this. It gave me some relief that they wouldn't be caught in the immediate aftermath, but the thought of how this would eventually affect them weighed on me. When I finally went upstairs, Lisa was sitting on the bed, her face blotchy from crying. She looked up at me with a mix of anger and desperation. Why, James? Why would you humiliate me like that? In front of everyone. You humiliated yourself, Lisa, I said, standing in the doorway. You lied to me, to Karen, to everyone who thought you were someone they could trust. All I did was pull back the curtain. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? I shot back. Were you going to keep sneaking around until I caught you in bed? Or were you planning to leave me once Brian figured out how to juggle his wife and his mistress? She winced at the word mistress, but didn't deny anything. I never wanted to hurt you, she said softly, as if that made it better. Well, congratulations, I said, my voice cold. You did. That night, I slept on the couch. I could hear her pacing upstairs, slamming drawers and muttering to herself. Part of me expected her to come down and try to talk things out, but she didn't. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I wanted her to. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The decision to end our marriage wasn't easy. There were years of history, good times, and of course, our kids to consider. But there was no coming back from this. Even if I could somehow forgive her, I'd never be able to trust her again. Lisa tried to talk to me later that day, but it was more of the same, excuses, half apologies, and a lot of deflecting. It wasn't just me, she said at one point. You weren't exactly the perfect husband, you know. I laughed bitterly. Maybe I wasn't perfect, but I didn't cheat. I didn't betray the person I vowed to love and respect. She didn't have a response to that. Karen, on the other hand, took swift action. Within a week, she had filed for divorce and moved out of the house she shared with Brian. She texted me occasionally, updating me on her progress and thanking me for helping her see the truth. She was strong, much stronger than I felt in those first few days. As for Brian, I heard through the grapevine that his life had fallen apart. Word about the affair spread quickly through their workplace, and he ended up resigning under the weight of the scandal. He tried reaching out to Lisa, but by then, she was too consumed with trying to salvage what was left of her life to entertain him. The fallout was far from over. Lisa and I had to figure out how to tell the kids, how to divide our assets, and how to navigate the awkward reality of co-parenting after such a public betrayal. But one thing was clear, the life we had built together was gone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and there was no more pretending. The next hurdle was telling the kids. That was the part one dreaded most. I didn't want to drag them into this mess, but there was no avoiding it. They deserved honesty, just not all the ugly details. Lisa and I sat them down a few days after the party. She started crying before she even said a word, so I took the lead. Mom and I have decided we won't be living together anymore, I said carefully. It's not something we wanted, but sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and have to take time apart to figure things out. Our oldest, Emma, just stared at me. She's 8, but she's sharp, too sharp for her own good. Is it because of that party? She asked bluntly. I froze. Lisa looked like she was about to crumble. We just want to do what's best for everyone, I said, dodging the question. But we both love you, and that will never change. Emma didn't push, but I could see the confusion and hurt in her eyes. Meanwhile, our youngest, Ben, just fiddled with his toy, too young to grasp what was happening. It broke my heart. After that, Lisa moved into her sister's place. She wanted to stay in the house, but I put my foot down. I wasn't the one who broke our vows, and I wasn't about to uproot the kids from the home they knew. The house felt quieter with her gone, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I threw myself into work and taking care of the kids, trying to create some sense of normalcy. Karen and I stayed in touch here and there, offering each other moral support. How are you holding up? She texted one evening. I thought about it for a minute before replying. Better now that I'm moving forward. One day at a time, right? She responded with a thumbs up emoji and a simple, same here. Lisa called occasionally, mostly to check on the kids, but her attempts to talk about us went nowhere. "Can't we try counseling?" she asked one night. "It's too late for that, Lisa," I said flatly. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." Every day was a mix of pain and progress, but for the first time, I felt like I was headed in the right direction. Let me know if you're ready to hear about how I started rebuilding. It wasn't easy, but I found my way. The first few weeks after Lisa left were a blur. Mornings were the hardest, waking up in an empty bed, the house unnervingly quiet. Even with everything she'd done, her absence was like a phantom limb. I missed the routine, not the person she'd become. But I didn't have the luxury of wallowing. The kids needed me to step up, so I threw myself into being the best dad I could. Emma and Ben kept me grounded. Between school drop-offs, homework, and their endless energy, there wasn't much time to dwell on what I'd lost. One evening, while cleaning up after dinner, Emma approached me with her serious grown-up face. "Daddy," she said, "are you okay?" Her question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask, sweetie?" "You just seem tired," she replied, fidgeting with her hands. "Mom says you'll feel better soon." I paused, kneeling to her level. "I'm okay, Emma. It's been a tough time for all of us, but I promise I'll always take care of you and Ben." Her little arms wrapped around my neck. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered. That moment hit me like a ton of bricks. It reminded me why I had to keep pushing forward, for them. The nights were still tough though. After the kids went to bed, the silence crept back in. I'd sit on the couch, scrolling through old pictures or aimlessly flipping channels. That's when the doubts would creep in. Did I do the right thing by exposing Lisa? Could I have handled it differently? But every time I thought about her lies, her betrayal, I knew there was no other path. Karen and I texted occasionally, checking in on each other. One day, she sent a message that stood out. "It's weird, isn't it? Trying to figure out who you are again." I stared at her words for a while before replying, "Yeah. It's like starting from scratch." Her response was simple: "You're not alone." As the days turned into weeks, I started to see small glimpses of light. I wasn't the same person I was before, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. I signed up for a gym membership, partly to blow off steam and partly to rebuild my confidence. It became my therapy, a place where I could let go of the anger and frustration that still lingered. About 2 months after the party, I was starting to feel a rhythm again. Work was steady, the kids were adjusting, and I was finding some peace. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It was a Saturday morning, and I'd taken the kids to the park. They were running around, laughing as they climbed the jungle gym. Watching them, I felt a rare sense of calm. For a little while, the storm of the last few months seemed far away. I was lost in thought when I heard someone say, "James." I turned to see Karen standing a few feet away. She was holding a coffee cup, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, looking both surprised and a little hesitant. "Hey," she said, offering a small smile. "Karen," I said, equally surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Same," she replied, glancing at the kids. "I needed to get out of the house, and this park is my go-to spot." We stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. The last time we'd spoken in person was at the party, and a lot had happened since then. "How are you holding up?" I asked finally. She shrugged. "Some days are better than others. Moving out was hard, but it feels like a step forward." "You?" "About the same," I admitted. "It's a process." She nodded, then gestured toward the bench I'd been sitting on. "Mind if I join you?" "Not at all," I said, scooting over to make room. We talked for a while, about the kids, her new apartment, and how strange it felt to start over. There was something comforting about the conversation. She understood the pain of betrayal in a way no one else could. As we talked, Emma and Ben ran over to ask for a snack. I handed them their sandwiches, and they darted back to the playground. Karen watched them with a soft smile. "You're a good dad, James," she said quietly. "It's obvious how much they adore you." "Thanks," I said, feeling a little awkward. "I'm just trying to do my best." She nodded. "We're both doing our best. That's all we can do." Before we parted ways, Karen said something that stuck with me. "You know, it's nice to talk to someone who gets it. Maybe we should grab coffee sometime." I hesitated for a second, then smiled. "Yeah, I'd like that." As I watched her walk away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Maybe, just maybe, There was room for something new in this messy, unexpected chapter of life. A few days after running into Karen at the park, I found myself thinking about her more than I expected. There was something calming about our conversation, something real. She wasn't just someone who understood what I'd been through, she was someone who felt like a kindred spirit. I finally texted her, "Still up for that coffee?" Her reply came almost instantly, "Absolutely." When? We decided to meet at a quiet cafe downtown that weekend. I dropped the kids off with my parents, who were happy to have them for a day, and drove to the cafe. I arrived a few minutes early, nervously fidgeting with my phone. It felt weird to be meeting someone like this, even if it was just coffee. When Karen walked in, she looked more relaxed than the last time I'd seen her. She smiled when she spotted me and waved as she approached. "Hey," she said, sitting down across from me. "Hey," I said, returning the smile. The conversation flowed easily, starting with small talk about work and the kids before diving deeper. We shared stories about how we'd been coping, her navigating life as a single mom, me juggling work and fatherhood while dealing with the fallout of Lisa's betrayal. "It's strange," she said, stirring her latte. "You think you know someone, and then one day, they become a stranger." "I know exactly what you mean," I replied. "It's like living with a stranger who wore a mask for years." She nodded, a sad smile on her face. "But at least now we know. No more pretending." That stuck with me. No more pretending. For so long, I'd been trying to hold everything together, trying to maintain the image of a perfect family. Now for the first time, I was free to be honest, with myself and everyone else. As we finished our coffee, Karen hesitated, then said, "I don't want to overstep, but it's nice to have someone to talk to. Maybe we could do this again." I nodded without hesitation. "I'd like that." We started meeting regularly, at first just for coffee or a walk in the park. It wasn't anything romantic, at least, not yet. It was two people finding comfort in each other's company, sharing laughs and frustrations, and slowly helping each other heal. But with every conversation, every shared smile, I felt something shifting. It was small at first, like a spark I wasn't ready to acknowledge. But it was there. Karen and I kept meeting regularly over the next few weeks. It started with casual coffee chats but soon grew into something more. We'd take walks at the park, grab lunch, or just sit and talk about life. There was something about her presence that felt comforting, like a steady anchor in the chaos my life had become. One afternoon, we met at a local bookstore. Karen loved reading, and she laughed when I admitted I wasn't much of a book guy. "Then why are we here?" I teased. "Because you need a new hobby," she said with a grin, dragging me toward the fiction section. We wandered through the aisles, her occasionally picking up a book to recommend. "This one's about starting over," she said, holding up a novel. "Might be fitting." I chuckled, but her words stayed with me. Starting over. That's exactly what we were both trying to do, even if neither of us fully realized it yet. The kids warmed up to Karen quickly. Emma was fascinated by her and loved the stories Karen told about her own childhood. Ben, being only 5, just liked that she brought snacks every time she visited. One evening, Karen joined us for dinner. I cooked something simple, pasta and garlic bread, and we all sat around the table like we'd done it 100 times before. Emma told a joke that wasn't particularly funny, but Karen laughed so hard that Emma beamed with pride. After the kids went to bed, Karen helped me clean up. As we stood by the sink, she suddenly said, "You're doing a great job with them." Her words caught me off guard. "I'm just trying to keep it together," I admitted, rinsing a plate. "Some days, it feels like I'm failing." She placed a hand on my arm. "You're not. They're happy, James. That's what matters." For a moment, we stood there, the weight of her words sinking in. It felt like she really saw me, the struggles, the effort, the doubts, and still thought I was doing okay. It was around this time that Lisa started pushing for reconciliation. She'd been calling and texting more frequently, always with the same message: "We can fix this." She'd even dropped by unannounced one evening, only to find Karen and the kids playing a board game in the living room. Her face turned red, and she left without saying a word. The next day, Lisa called. "Is she your new girlfriend?" she snapped. "No," I said firmly. "Karen is a friend. But even if she were more than that, it wouldn't be your business anymore." There was silence on the other end before she muttered, "I made a mistake, James. I don't want to lose everything." "You already did," I replied quietly. "You just didn't realize it until now." One afternoon, Karen and I took the kids to a pumpkin patch. It was a perfect fall day, cool air, golden leaves, and the smell of cider in the air. Emma and Ben raced ahead, laughing as they tried to find the biggest pumpkins. Karen walked beside me, holding a cup of coffee, and for the first time, it felt like we were more than just two friends. It felt like a family. At one point, Emma grabbed Karen's hand, pulling her toward a particularly large pumpkin. Karen glanced at me with a shy smile, and I realized how natural it all felt, like this was how things were supposed to be. Later that evening, after the kids were asleep, Karen and I sat on the couch, sipping tea. "Today was nice," she said softly. "Your kids are amazing." "They like you," I said. "Probably because you bring snacks." She laughed, then grew quiet. "I like them too. And I like this." She gestured between us. "Whatever this is." I looked at her, my heart pounding. "I do too," I admitted. For a moment, we just sat there, the unspoken words hanging in the air. Then, almost instinctively, I leaned closer. Karen hesitated, her eyes searching mine, and then she closed the gap. The kiss was soft and hesitant, like we were both testing the waters. But it felt right, like something we'd both been waiting for without even knowing it. After she left that night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. About the way she smiled, the way she made me feel like I wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. After that kiss, everything felt different. Not in a bad way, though. It was the kind of different where you start noticing the little things. Like how Karen smiled when I joked, or how her laugh could lighten up the heaviest day. But it wasn't just light and airy. It came with a dose of reality. I had kids, an ex who still lingered on the edges, and a life that felt like it was always teetering on the edge of chaos. The day after the kiss, Karen and I had a long talk. We met at the park again, sitting on the same bench where we'd first reconnected. "So, last night," she said, her voice careful, like she didn't want to step on a landmine. "Yeah," I replied, just as carefully. We were like two kids trying to figure out if it was okay to hold hands for the first time. "I like you, James," she said finally, looking at me. "But I don't want to rush into anything. Not with everything you're dealing with. And everything I'm dealing with." "I get it," I said, and I really did. Life was messy enough without throwing in unrealistic expectations. We can take it slow. No pressure, no labels. Just see where it goes. She smiled, and I swear it could have melted the frost off a January morning. I like that. Slow turned out to be its own kind of adventure. Some nights, she'd come over after the kids went to bed, and we'd sit on the couch watching terrible movies while arguing over popcorn flavors. She's team butter, I'm team caramel, don't judge. Other times, we'd go for long walks, talking about everything from our worst first dates to how much we hated parallel parking. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was real. Comfortable. Like slipping into your favorite hoodie on a cold day. Of course, Lisa wasn't exactly thrilled. She showed up unannounced one Saturday morning, catching Karen and me mid-pancake breakfast with the kids. The second Lisa walked in, her eyes locked on Karen like she'd just found a stranger rearranging her kitchen cabinets. "Seriously, James?" Lisa said, crossing her arms. "You're already playing house with someone else?" Karen, to her credit, stayed calm and collected. "I'm not trying to replace you, Lisa," she said. "I'm just here for coffee and pancakes." Lisa ignored her and turned to me. "Do you even care how this looks? To the kids? To me?" I sighed, setting my fork down. "The kids are happy, Lisa. That's what matters. You don't get to play the victim here." Her face turned red, but she didn't argue. Instead, she muttered something about needing to talk later and stormed out. Karen gave me a small sympathetic smile as she sipped her coffee. "So, that went well," she said, her voice dripping with dry humor. Despite Lisa's attempts to stir the pot, Karen and I found a groove. She became part of our little world, not taking over, but adding something we didn't know we were missing. Emma loved her, even calling her Aunt Karen one day, which made Karen blush and laugh at the same time. Ben, being 5, just thought Karen's cookies were better than mine, which was entirely fair. Still, there were moments of doubt. Late at night, after the house was quiet, I'd sit on the couch and wonder if I was moving too fast, or if I deserved this at all. Could I really build something new when my old life felt like it was still hanging in pieces? Karen seemed to sense those moments. One night, As we walked back to her car, she paused and looked at me. "You're allowed to be happy, you know," she said softly. "You don't have to feel guilty about it." I didn't respond right away, but her words stayed with me. Maybe she was right. Maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let go of the past and embrace something new. For a while, it felt like things were finally settling. Karen and I had found a rhythm, the kids were adjusting well, and even Lisa had backed off, for the most part. But peace doesn't last long when there are unresolved feelings and egos involved. It started subtly, as most things with Lisa did. She'd call late at night, saying she needed to talk about the kids, but the conversations would inevitably shift to us. "You know, James," she said one evening, "I really think we could make things work if we tried." "Lisa," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose, "there's nothing to fix. I've moved on. You need to do the same." She let out a bitter laugh. "Moved on? With her? James, we were married for 10 years. Does that mean nothing to you?" "It meant everything," I said, my voice steady. "But you threw it away. You don't get to rewrite the story now." The tension escalated when Lisa started questioning Karen's involvement with the kids. "I don't want her playing mom," she snapped during one of our exchanges. "She's not their mother." "She's not trying to be," I countered. "Karen has been nothing but kind to Emma and Ben. They like her. You should be grateful someone cares about them." Lisa scoffed. "Grateful? You're seriously saying that to me?" At that point, I knew arguing was pointless. Lisa wasn't mad about Karen spending time with the kids. She was mad that Karen was in my life at all. Things boiled over at Emma's soccer game. Karen and I had brought snacks for the kids and were sitting on the sidelines, cheering Emma on. Lisa showed up halfway through, her expression sour when she spotted Karen beside me. After the game, as Emma ran up to show us her trophy, Lisa swooped in. "Mommy's here," she said brightly, pulling Emma into a hug. Karen stepped back, giving them space, but Lisa wasn't done. "Who brought you those snacks?" Lisa asked, her tone sugary sweet. "Karen did," Emma replied, oblivious to the tension. Lisa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "That's nice of her. But remember, sweetie, Mommy's the one who always packs your lunch for school." Emma looked confused, glancing between us. I felt the anger rising but kept my voice calm. "Lisa, this isn't the time." "Isn't it?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I think it's important for Emma to know who her real family is." Karen, to her credit, stayed silent, though I could see the hurt flash across her face. I gently steered Emma toward the car and told Lisa, "We'll talk later." That night, Karen admitted it was starting to get to her. "I don't want to cause problems, James," she said, her voice soft. "If me being around is making things harder for the kids." "Don't even think like that," I interrupted. "You're not the problem. Lisa's just struggling to accept that things have changed." She hesitated, then nodded. "I just don't want to make it worse for you." "You're not," I assured her. "If anything, you're making it better." Still, I knew Lisa wasn't going to back down easily. Her resentment was building, and I had to find a way to set firm boundaries before it spiraled further. The problem was, Lisa wasn't the only one struggling with the new reality. I was too. Balancing a co-parenting relationship with a burgeoning romance wasn't exactly something I'd prepared for, and the cracks were starting to show. The tension with Lisa had reached its breaking point after the soccer game. It wasn't just about Karen anymore, it was about control. Lisa didn't like that she wasn't at the center of my life, and she was using the kids as leverage. I knew I had to put a stop to it. The next time Lisa called to talk about the kids, I kept my tone firm. "Lisa, we need boundaries," I said. "I'll always keep you in the loop about Emma and Ben, but you don't get to dictate my personal life." Her response was immediate and sharp. "You think you're some victim, James? You're acting like I don't have a right to care about who's around my kids. You care more about Karen being in my life than what's best for Emma and Ben," I shot back. "That's what this is really about." She was silent for a moment before muttering, "You don't get it." "I get it perfectly," I said. "But this isn't about us anymore. It's about moving forward, for the kids. Stop making this harder than it has to be." It wasn't an easy conversation, but it seemed to work for now. Lisa stopped showing up unannounced and kept her comments about Karen to herself. Still, I could sense her bitterness lingering, like a storm cloud just out of reach. Karen, on the other hand, was patient and understanding through it all. "I know this is messy," she told me one evening. But I'm here for the long haul, James. If you're okay with me being part of this chaos, I'm okay with it too. Her words eased the weight on my chest. I wouldn't have it any other way, I said. For the first time in a while, I felt like things were finally starting to level out. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Life slowly began to find its rhythm. The chaos of Lisa's interference subsided, replaced by a steadier, more manageable routine. The kids were thriving, Emma focused on her soccer games, and Ben had discovered a love for drawing. They were adapting to the new normal, and honestly, so was I. Karen became a constant in our lives, but she never tried to replace Lisa. She stayed in her lane, offering support without overstepping. The kids adored her, and over time, her presence became as natural as breathing. One evening, Emma curled up next to Karen on the couch, showing her a book from school. Ben sat on the floor, coloring a picture of the whole family, Karen included. When he showed it to me, my heart swelled. "This is us," he said proudly, pointing to the figures. "Mommy, Daddy, Emma, me, and Karen. I made her yellow, 'cause she's like the sun." Karen looked at me, her eyes glistening, and I knew we were on the right path. Lisa, though distant, had started to focus more on herself. She began dating again and seemed to accept that our marriage was over. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of tension, but we were learning how to co-parent without letting old wounds reopen. One day, as we handed off the kids, she said, "You seem happy." "I am," I replied honestly. She gave a small, bittersweet smile. I guess that's all I could hope for. As for Karen and me, we kept building on what we had, slowly, thoughtfully, with no rush to define it. One night, as we sat on the porch after the kids were asleep, I took her hand. "You've changed everything for me," I said. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again." She squeezed my hand, her smile warm and genuine. "It's not just me. You did the work too, James. You chose to move forward." For the first time in years, I felt like I could let go of the past and embrace what was ahead.